Thank you for allowing me into your homes for this 27th episode of Esoteric Science Roundtable. This is a live call-in show, and we will be taking calls to discuss today's topic at around 40 past the hour, rather, sorry. It is good to be back in the saddle after a 2-week hiatus. We're off due to the scheduling here at Access. And first off, I would like to thank Mary Pope, producer of the Access show Common Sense, or whoever is responsible for including our show in their list of what Chris Athanas would refer to as freedom shows here on the Access channel or channels. And I've seen it listed twice, so I am confident that it was not an error. And those folks are on live every Wednesday on Channel 10, same channel I'm on, from 8 to 9. And I'd like to thank George Humphrey and crew for the fine work that they are doing. The topic this evening, in the initials that you saw earlier, NGWS, refers to the new group of world servers. And that's just a generalized term that's been kind of applied to a certain group that, again, is a serving group that has it in mind to help out as much as possible to help the race and to move that whole process along. I wanted to mention common sense to help demonstrate unanimity of purpose in the work at hand, and that there is a common thread and a shared vision that is shared between many of the shows here on Access and many people in general. Again, what is the new group of world servers? It is a functioning, active group, every man and woman in every country in the world who is working to heal the divisions between people, to evoke a sense of brotherhood, to foster the sense of mutual interrelation, and who see no racial, national, or religious barriers, is a member of the new group of world servers, even if they have never heard of it in these terms. Now, just to clarify a bit, you don't have to, there's no such thing as a membership fee, there's no card-carrying member of the so-called group of world servers, and you don't have to have an esoteric science background in order to be a member of a particular group. Now, there's a particular plan, so-called, that this group follows. Now, what is that plan? Well, certainly, there is purpose behind the divine evolutionary unfoldment, expressing itself through the various kingdoms in nature. The plan is the drawing out and blending together of synthetic intelligent understanding and active cooperation with divine purpose or the will of God. Now, the plan is the implementation of man's inherent ability to co-create with God, to rediscover our heritage and our spiritual birthright. Due to the point reached in the evolution of humanity, those that watch and guide the race, or Christ and the Church Invisible, saw an opportunity to come into closer contact with men and to begin the embryonic stages of this worldwide group endeavor. Now, the template or pattern for this work existed from around 1400 AD, and it's slowly and gradually been making its way and impressing itself upon our physical plane. Now, as those members of the Kingdom of Heaven observed man's readiness for instilling integration, now to clarify that a bit, as far as the idea of instilling integration, that takes place at many levels, and the first aspect of it is integration of the personality, or the practice or the accomplishment of melding the physical, the emotional, and our mental body, and to not be predisposed in any one of these bodies, but to have a balanced, integrated personality that is a vessel that can allow the influence of the soul to come down in a more conducive manner. And the ways, also another way of integration is just the idea of integration of society, integration of humanity, and understanding that we have a one humanity, that we are all brothers in this whole scheme of things as we progress and evolve and live our lives, but that is part and parcel of everything, and that we can see things moving into an integrated process, and that things are becoming one in so many different ways. And that's not to again, that can be kind of confusing, and that can be a bit, not everybody cares for that concept of a one world. And again, I'm going to elaborate on that a bit more, because there are different versions of a one world order or what have you that different camps are trying to impress upon upon mankind. And the ways in which the inspiration and impression of the concept of unity were considered over the past 600 years, they consider this quality of synthesis, and they basically laid out an impression, if you will, for those that could gravitate towards it. Now, again, it's found its way gradually into public consciousness, and varying people can grasp this plan, so-called, at varying levels of understanding. Again, this trend of group thinking, of a shared vision, and purpose, and the fact of the one humanity has steadily come forward into the waking consciousness of a vast number of the population of the planet. Now, since 1925, roughly speaking, the outer activities have been more pronounced and noticeable from this so-called new group of world servers. The key indicator is the group and group thinking. Now, if we consider briefly how many groups have come into being since the early 20th century, really we have more groups than you can shake a stick at. There's groups everywhere. And if you ever watch C-SPAN, you see that there are many groups that are working and doing good and beneficial work, you know, right there in the viper's den, and that they are actually slugging it out in the trenches, and they're trying to make a difference and trying to, again, affiliate themselves with an ideology that is beneficial for humanity and is not separative thinking, but is inclusive in scope. And that is a very big factor in this whole work, so-called. Now, again, there are very many groups working, and the physical plane manifestation of man's longing to be one with his fellow man is very much part of this as well. Man has a longing to share, to exchange, and to interact with one another. And that's our innate sense. Now, unfortunately, a sense of brotherhood is not active and alive in all members of the human family. But in actuality, there are hundreds of millions, if not billions. Now, this is our hope and the promise of the future. So there are, in actuality, many around the world of varying cultures, varying ethnicities, varying religious dispensations and denominations that have this inner sense, this strong, overwhelming inner sense of responsibility to work in some way for, again, the salvaging of the race, or to help humanity to heal the cleavages that we have to deal with, and all of the divisiveness that we're faced with in many aspects of our life. Now, mankind has awakened to a larger reality outside of his immediate environment, starting to see himself as a citizen in a global community and part of a cog in the whole. And again, that's not to take away from our own individualized sense, our own individual natures, and our own aspect of free will. We do have that aspect in us, inherent in us. And so, again, it's a little bit, but it does, because that might connote, you know, just part of a worker class or worker bee that's not really. That is a problem too, as far as how people perceive our place in the global community. Many people think that they don't want to have any involvement whatsoever with a global situation. They want to stay isolated and insulated in their own lives and their own world, and to not accept a larger reality. And I think that's a bit unfortunate. That's going to be that's a limited or limiting perspective that's going to keep some people, you know, kind of kept in a small little area and not able to experience a larger reality or a larger expansion of consciousness that we do indeed have access to in these crucial and trying times that we're living in these days. Now, this new group of world servers may be found actively engaged in work in all fields of human endeavor, mainly through cultural, political, religious, scientific, philosophical, psychological, and, believe it or not, the financial institutions of the world. Now, certainly that's a dual-edged sword as well, because if we understand the nature of the World Bank, the IMF, and the World Monetary Fund, that there is, you know, there's agendas always, and as to whose agenda is going to win out in the end, if we do indeed have some sort of global financial system, which it is merging towards, it's just going to depend on what kind of a financial system we're going to have. You know, can we have one that's going to provide for as many people as possible, or is it going to be applied so that the benefits are reaped by just a an ultra small segment of our population on this planet. That battle, that jockeying for position is actually being waged, and we can all kind of throw in our weight into this whole jockeying for public opinion, and you see over and over again this massive demonstrations at these organizations' meetings, the WTO and what have you. When they get together, you see mass demonstrations, and so you see where public opinion truly lies. Those that are impressed, again, by a sense of need to have a level playing field so that we can all share in the wealth of this planet. There's plenty of wealth on the planet. It's basically frozen in a handful of groups, and that would be through the world's religions, the trusts of the world. It's frozen to a certain degree. The wealth of the wealthiest small percent of the people. These are the people that do not show up on the wealthiest lists of people. They far are outside of that small little list, and they have much more wealth than is ever reported in that sense. And so you do have these groups that are holding on to this large money, and again through the monetary system, through the banking system. The money is just electronically zipping around the world constantly. It's like its own living flow, but generally the flow is not circulating through the whole body politic. It's only flowing through a small segment and generating energy for the few. And that definitely, if we can weigh in thought on that whole process and think about that somewhat, we can find the ways that we can make it a system that would incorporate the best economic systems that we have on the planet currently. It can incorporate some ideas of capitalism, some ideas of socialism, and it could even incorporate the idea of barter to a certain degree, that we can exchange with other countries. If you need agricultural goods, if you need wheat, grains, maybe you have something that you can exchange with us, and that way we can accommodate everyone as to the best of our ability and make it a world economic system that is, again, beneficial for many and not limited to the whims of the few, as it tends to be these days. Now, contrary to certain opinions, not all members of these governing bodies, these policy-making bodies, CFR, Bilderbergers, trilaterals, are bad. And I know that's a bit of a controversial statement as well, but if you think about lately in particular, George Humphrey had a guest a short time ago who was offered membership to the CFR, and he refused on his own moral grounds that he didn't want to be affiliated with that particular body. Alex Jones has recently interviewed a CFR member who has the same concerns for our freedom as so many people share. And also, the janitor at the United Nations. Is he a bad guy? Is he, worshiping Satan in a broom closet somewhere? Not necessarily. There's these people that are affiliated with these organizations. There are those people that have some sort of a vision for humanity. They have a global scope and a global perspective, and they want to see, as much as possible, everybody get their fair shake and their fair chance to, again, express their creativity, express your free will, express your individuality in the context of a global whole, and that we can appreciate everybody's culture, everybody's language, everybody's, everything can exist and coexist, and there can be mutual respect, and that is a big key to this whole thing. Now, certainly, again, there are members, and even again, members of the World Bank. There's at least one person I'm familiar with, a woman that's from the World Bank, that seems to have the proper perspective and is not. But again, some of these people that have this global perspective, they're not fully aware of the whole paradigm. They haven't fully broken the matrix, so to speak, and so they have only a part of the pie. They deal a lot of times in just what they see in the physical plane, and they're not. Any impression that they may have that's influencing them outside of their own understanding, they're only able to understand a piece of the pie, and so they don't see the full scope of the scheming that's going on behind the scenes, and the totalitarian slant that it seems to be domineering so many people's impression and interpretation of what a new world order is going to be for us. And so there are people that we can work with in these organizations and that are coming to an understanding of what's going on, and they are coming and speaking out. And that is, again, our hope and our glory, that these people are waking up, if you can use that term, and coming around, having a larger understanding of what's going on, a larger reality. The new group of world servers doesn't work to destroy the old order as much as to intelligently maneuver through the existing systems and to unite, build, and salvage the best of the past, and to synthetically blend these efforts into a living, dynamic, divine expression. Now, this is a symptom of the incoming inclusive Aquarian age that is dawning upon us and is superseding or overtaking the old impulse, the old age, which was the Piscean age, an age of devotion to a religious ideology, to a movie star, to a musician. It's the personality worship aspect of it, devotion to a political cause or a political party. Those kind of things are gradually changing, and so that you don't see people strictly devoted to things like they were in the past. They're more open to a more inclusive aspect, and they're seeing that there is a place for everything in the sun, that all the parts have their place in the sun. Now again, as far as trying to bring in these ideals, how is this done? Many times you hear people call these shows and they're concerned about what they can do. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough, and I'll continue to emphasize this on my show as much as possible, that thought does indeed rule the world, that a thought is indeed a thing, and as thought changes and as public opinion is swayed and public consciousness moves, so do physical plane activities change to follow that energy and that force, and they in turn mold themselves to a thought impression, an ideology, a new social concept, what have you. You find people gravitating towards these concepts more so and more so. Now, ideals and concepts are impressed upon the minds of men, and men are in turn inspired to carry out certain work. This is a scientific process of impression, and it does not impose upon our individual free will. That's something very important to keep in mind, that any body of, again, like I've called earlier, Christ and the Church Invisible, or the hierarchy, the general group that's impressing for the beneficial aspect of man. True, there are those impressing behind the scenes for negative aspects as well, and there's always that jockeying. But those that work behind the scenes to guide the race, Christ and the Church Invisible, respect our free will, and that factors in very much as well. Now, we can accept and embrace these impressions or reject and ignore them as we choose. But more often than not, visionary members of the human family who are receptive to the higher ideal, the divine plan, become motivated to move. They may feel that they came up with something on their own, that an idea or concept is of their making, independent of influence. Nonetheless, they often are gravitating magnetically to an already existing thought form and are able to lock in and anchor this image into actual physical plane existence in some way. Now again, it may manifest itself as a social program, a piece of legislation, an invention, or a renewed infusion of spirituality into an existing religion or system of belief. Some examples would be the Magna Carta, the U.S. Constitution, the invention of the telephone, the Protestant Reformation, the Velvet Revolution of the former Czechoslovakia, the psychedelic movement of the 60s, or in the instance of a musical messenger like Curtis Mayfield. Now, how this impression actually finds its way into our physical plane consciousness differs according to individuals. Now, again, a controversial statement is going to be made here. Even Napoleon and Hitler were impressed with a larger vision, but their personality shortcomings and character flaws led to a distortion of its practical unfoldment. And if you're aware of how Hitler reversed a religious symbol, the swastika, reversed it and made it anti-God. That again is a demonstration and a graphic example of how they distorted the truth. And in spite of their inadequacies, again in the event of a Hitler or Napoleon, they seized an ideal and ran with it. They were the means of change on a world scale, and they caused realignment, refocus, and redistribution that created currents of force not immediately recognizable and apparent, that led ultimately to a more unified human interaction. And so often these members are kind of unconscious in their desire, their determination, their strong will to create some new system, to create some new implementation upon our physical plane. And so they, again, whether they're good or bad in their moral stance or what have you, anyone can be influenced, and certain people are going to be the ones that step up and make use of an influence that may be coming in, and again, run with it and make some creation on the physical plane, whether it's a hell on earth or it's heaven on earth. It's, it depends. Now, the new group of world servers, in turn, works through the upheavals to help heal and build constructively within the changing political climate and landscape. They accentuate the good, the true, and the beautiful. There is involved also a sixfold process of transmission from the will of God, or the Father in heaven, to the man in the street. And again, this is a scientific procedure. I can't emphasize that enough. Love, light, and power, not light from a light, not a physical plane light, but actual light, living light, basically step down love in a way. You can look at it that way. Light, love, and power, originating with the will of God, or the Father in heaven, are stepped down in intensity. It next flows into the hierarchy, or the church invisible, and from there to Christ as the head of the hierarchy, and then to the new group of world servers, in turn to men and women of goodwill, and finally to physical centers of distribution that can be accessed and received by all of humanity at some level. So everyone can make use of the impulse of the Father aspect. It does influence us, and it does rain down on us in a sense, and we can gravitate towards, grasp, and bring some understanding of that divine will into our lives if we so choose. And again, everyone is capable of pulling some of that down to some degree. And again, as to what they choose to do with that energy is kind of up to them. So that also depends as well. The new group of world servers forms a linking intermediary of transmitting group between the kingdom of heaven and those individuals who have a profound sense of responsibility to their fellow man, who express living goodwill and not some fluffy sentiment of well-being based on selfish tendencies, but a need to act and respond to a sense need in some area. Now, to give an example, the domesticated animals provide an analogy to the linking relation of the new group of world servers to the race of men. The domesticated animal is to the animal kingdom what the new group of world servers is to the man in the street, who is pulled to and fro by situations and circumstances and who feels he is a victim of fate or ill fortune. The new group of world servers is better capable of receiving a more pure interpretation of the divine will by virtue of this life of service that they've devoted themselves to, a life of purity and a life of selfless service to the race, that they are able by virtue of this to have the means at their disposal to have a clearer understanding. Now again, you don't have to understand esoteric science to be a member of this so-called group. There are from all walks of life and all dispensations, there are those that form this group and that work together, largely, not recognizing one another, but recognizing common work, recognizing unanimity of purpose, or recognizing the one shared vision, again, that those people that truly embrace free will, truly embrace our free mobility and our rights, our birthright to all of these things, that those are the people that are truly, at the cusp of this, and they're trying to implement this interpretation of the New World Order as opposed to a totalitarian slant, which we tend to find prevalent these days. The new group of world servers comes from all countries, cultures, ethnicities. They are rich and poor, as I can attest to a certain degree, from widely varying careers. They bring their unique perspective, their own individual interpretation of the plan of synthesis. Again, the keynote of the Aquarian astrological age is synthesis, inclusive group thinking. Again, science dictates these processions of the heavens, and will or thought of all sentient, self-conscious beings brings it into manifestation at some level. Our opportunity to co-create is monumental at this time in our history. Many groups are aware of this, and many groups are in their own area bringing this process into what we call reality. Some value, excuse me, some value our divine birthright above anything else. And there are those that have no regard for our free will, our free mobility, our free expression, and above all, they have fear. And this is something that I've talked about on the show before too, as far as eliminating fear, overlooking fear, accepting fear for what it is, but keep fear here. Don't internalize fear. Well, there are those groups, and I choose to term them those that wish to enslave us, those that work in high places, and again, work to enslave us through different means, and to try to make themselves our masters, and to try to have all of the great benefits of this planet and our evolution hoarded amongst just a small minority. And they do have fear. This group actually does have a real sense of fear. They have an intense fear, grave, mortal terror. They are infested with fright. They hide away, they loathe, they hate. And of what are they so afraid? Our discovery of our divine birthright, of our potential for power to co-create with the divine and to express, anchor, and instill the quality of love in all men, to actively engage in goodwill and right human relations. We truly have that opportunity now as never before, and so that's why you see this stepping up process. You see all of these camps from different angles that are trying to implement and impose their own interpretation of a so-called New World Order, and so you find them jockeying for position, and you find, again, those that are already in established power that are feeling insecure about this whole transition process, excuse me, and they being very well aware of what's available astrologically, and those members that have their own understanding of occult science or esoteric science, but who choose to prostitute it towards their own selfish ends, they're very firmly aware of this opportunity that we have. Now again, it's just a little bit new agey and what have you, but still, it's, whether you choose to believe that this group has access to this information and uses it for their benefit, that's up to you as to whether you choose to believe that or not. I'm just bringing this out for public consumption for you to consider. But nonetheless, there are those people that they believe in this so-called black magic. They are the ones that put their faith in it, that they use this for their own ends. And so whether you choose to believe that or not is entirely up to you, but these individuals believe it. And that is what's truly key. They believe, and they believe they have a birthright. Not a divine birthright, but some birthright, some claim on being our masters and imposing their wills upon us. And that, again, is against divine law and against the divine plan. And so you see the jockeying, you see the impressions being made behind the scenes to try to influence and win the thoughts of the minds of men. You see the battle for public consciousness waged through media outlets. You see the battle being waged through internet sources, all forms of communication. You see it waged through. You see it waged through, even as much as our food supply, and many ways. There are levels of control that are being implemented, that are being again stepped up, so that we can, there is again those that are aware that they need to act, that they are desperate in a large degree, that they have to bring in and impose their totalitarian view of what's coming down the pike as far as a global community. They have to implement that as quickly as possible because they see the time is ripe for mankind to have an awakening on a large scale, as we already are having, and as you can see evidence through the access television shows and other alternative means of communication. And unfortunately, we have to have these alternative means because mass media is so controlled and manipulated that unless we can wade through and have the proper intuitive sense to understand who's zooming whom, we're going to have difficulty, and we may in some respects be overwhelmed by all the negativity. People just get frozen in on the box and they let it tell them what's going on and they let it program them, and that's basically what it is. The programming is programming, and it does manipulate us at some level, whether we're cognizant of it and aware of it or not. And so we have to just overcome that will to sit and flip and hit the power button. Hit the power button and get up and read a book or do something constructive. And that's what I encourage folks to do. Certainly we have our free will, and if you want to sit in front of the box for all eternity and again let it program you, that's certainly your prerogative, and that's your, you know, your life's paradigm, your reality tunnel, your version of the matrix, however you choose to term it. And so we have all these different people, these different levels of awareness. You know, again, I'd like to mention the level, or the transmission and the scientific stepping down, if you will, of the will aspect of God, or the Father in heaven, and how it finds its way step down through the hierarchy, through Church Invisible, through Christ as the head of the hierarchy, through what I'm terming the new group of world servers, those that truly have feel an obligation to serve their race, serve the race, not their race, serve the race, the human race, don't want to mislead there, and that we all are part of this whole thing, that we all can respect one another and move forward collectively, again, respective of our individualities, nurturing our creativity, nurturing our free expression, but still respectful of everyone else as much as possible. That really can take place. And again, from this new group of world servers to what is termed men and women of goodwill, and these people generally gravitate at some level to the impressions, again, as they're transmitted through the new group of world servers, and then finally from the men and women of goodwill down to physical plane centers of distribution, and through those centers into all of humanity, and that humanity can partake at some level as is it's stepped down for their consumption, I guess you could use that term. But that those in those ranks, that transmission process, again, the new group of world servers holds an intermediary position between Christ and the Church Invisible and the men and women of goodwill. And so you find these impressions being seized upon and being gravitated towards by those that can have a clear vision, the so-called new group of world servers, and they can in turn impart their understanding on down the line a bit further to the men and women of goodwill, and they can in turn, these are generally, the new group, the men and women of goodwill are in many instances those that are not necessarily the organizers of different social things, and they're not usually the organizers, but they're usually gravitating towards a concept that some magnetic person is bringing forward. Now, again, whether that's a magnetic person that's bringing forward a concept that can be used for manipulation, or whether it's a concept that can be used for our betterment and our help, that also, depends. Because we have free will, and everybody has a motive, and generally, people tend to have agendas, whether it's a selfish agenda, whether it's an agenda that's for the many, it's varying in that sense. Now again, those that are wishing to impose our restrictive totalitarian slant are indeed in grave fear. They know, for one thing, the benchmark year of 2012 is coming down the pike, and that portends change. It's not an end time, it's a transition time, and that's something to keep firmly in mind as well, that we are transitioning into an opportunity for a larger expansion of consciousness. And again, our discovery of our divine birthright, of our potential for power to co-create with the divine and to express, anchor, and instill the quality of love in all men, to actively engage in goodwill and right human relations, and that time is now for us to seize upon that, should we so choose. Christ and those with whom he works are nearer to humanity than they have been in some time. We can work with them if we have the will. That again is our choice as to how intimately and how closely we want to involve ourselves with what we would consider this work at hand as far as salvaging humanity, bringing in a synthetic understanding that is synthetic yet inclusive of individuals. And that's the key. There is a way that that balance can be met. It seems difficult, but there can be a balance in which the many have their place in the sun, and there's respect. There's mutual respect among nations, among cultures, among ethnicities, and what have you. Now, I haven't read this quote in a while, so I'll go ahead and borrow the quote that I used from Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of our poet-philosophers, American poet-philosophers. Great men are they who see that spiritual is stronger than any material force, that thoughts rule the world. And that's something to emphasize what I've been speaking about earlier as well. A thought is a thing. A thought is a real, actual, substantial, existing thing. And thought does move. That's whole science of transmission works in the sense that an idea or a thought form, again, if it's for an invention or what have you, is kind of existing and is thrown out by minds that can interpret the divine will and can, again, step down this interpretation to give us access to things that are usable, that we can use for the helping of the race. We can bring these ideas down and we can, again, create something on the physical plane as a result of this magnetic impression. Now, that's not to say that every single idea that everybody has is already predetermined, or that these gentlemen are impressing us to the point where we don't have our own free will. That's, again, very contrary to what is actually taking place. These gentlemen and women do respect our free will, more so than other groups do, more of the imposing groups, and they're constrained by that fact. They cannot, as much as they'd like to, intercede with the race, and so they have to hold back and respect our free will and work again through the cracks, if you will, and find their way synthetically to build through this existing structure. And I've mentioned before on the show, this New World Order substructure, the superstructure, the base of this new world is going to stay intact to a certain degree. It's just going to change hands. It's going to change hands from those with a totalitarian slant to those that are more global and inclusive in their understanding. And that transition is taking place. And that part and parcel of what's going on with that is the nearing of the world teacher, of Christ. And that is speeding up, again, this whole process. Mankind is fitting himself and becoming more ready for that relationship. And so as he evolves and fits himself as a more proper servant of the race, that magnetic link, that merger, can come forward, and we can have the so-called kingdom of heaven on earth. That is the meaning. That is the meaning of the marriage in the heavens and the idea of the kingdom of heaven established on earth. It is a merging of the fourth kingdom, or the human kingdom, with the fifth kingdom, or the kingdom, the hierarchy, or Christ and the church invisible. There is a merging that will take place, and first you will find the outer members of this hierarchy, so-called, working and aligning themselves with those prolific servers of the race that can grasp the highest ideals for, again, the helping of the race. They will work intimately with those individuals, and they will help to instill and anchor these qualities, in particular the quality of love and wisdom. We find our way, once again, back to this concept of love. Our evolutionary purpose is to instill in our dense material being the quality of love, to refine our dense material nature with spirit, and to, again, as much as possible, if we so choose, accentuate the good, the true, and the beautiful, and to manifest something of real beauty here on this earth that we have access to. So many people are preoccupied with the negative aspect of what would be considered a new world order, and they limit themselves that way. We do not have to be limited. We do not have to be fearful of what's coming down the pike in the very near future. We can, again, ride the wave, if you will, and we can ride it out, and we can take advantage of it. We can harness this energy that's coming down the pike. We can harness it and we can make use of it, or we can let it overwhelm us and wash us over and drown us for all intents and purposes. That, again, is our choice. It's our paradigm to make that decision. So as we choose, so our thoughts, the energy of our thoughts, steps down and creates and changes and moves and shakes and creates different paradigms. Now, again, we can counteract, diffuse, negate, render impotent, and refuse any action that seeks to impose on our free will. If we find someone trying to bring in a totalitarian vision of a new world order, which some of us feel is a little more than obvious, there are the methods whereby a terror-driven state may be capitalized upon by people with the concept of Christ in you, the hope of glory, vital, awake, and alive in them. They are overshadowed by Christ, and this is a precursor to the actual return of Christ and the church invisible, active among the sons of men. Now, as I stated, This, likewise, is not being looked forward to by some groups, and there is going on behind the scenes to influence and to mold the interpretation of how that event will transpire. Because, quite frankly, those that wish to enslave us are aware that the return of Christ is imminent, and that they have to try to slant our interpretation of how that event is going to transpire so that they can diminish it as much as they possibly can. They don't want that event to have the full glory, the full repercussions that it actually will for our world. It's going to shake things up quite considerably. And there are those that want to keep the status quo. They want to keep things right as they are, and they don't want any influence. They don't want their little paradigm toppled, and they don't want to have to be forced to see eye to eye with average humanity. They want to still remain elite and still keep all the cookies in the cookie jar for themselves. And that's unfortunate that there are people that still have that attitude. But again, it's all part of this whole paradigm, this whole earth existence, that we all choose limitation. We all choose our particular slant as we come in to life, and we have to follow that out. We have obligation, dharma so-called, and we have debt that we have to pay. And what's spoken of as an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That debt we have to pay. We have to pay back. Maybe not in this particular lifetime, but in some succeeding lifetime. And again, the idea of reincarnation is a very soothing concept to me in particular, and hopefully to many other people as well. The idea that we don't just have one life, we have many lives, and this Corey suit that I'm currently sporting just does not have that much significance for me ultimately. It's, I know what is essentially, what the essence of what I am is outside of this physical vehicle, and so the true conscious aspect of myself is attached, yes, to this vehicle, but is not the true inner core or the true inner spiritual essence of what is actually me. And so by virtue of that, the idea that we have opportunities to shed our clothes and try on another suit as need makes itself apparent through our different lifetimes, that the concept of reincarnation, again, to me is quite reassuring. And it's like if something shady goes down and I have to suffer in this physical vehicle, it really means next to nothing, because I know, regardless of how bad things may possibly and potentially get down the pike, that we still have the opportunity to really understand our core essence and understand that we can't truly be hurt. Pain is a temporary thing, and discomfort is a temporary thing, and for us to be sidetracked by some idea that, we're going to come into some misery or some pain if we don't play by the rules, if we don't submit and subjugate ourselves to authority, that we're going to have problems and we can't go against the grain. Well, that's certainly not the case. You can fight City Hall and you can make a difference if you so choose. I am going to go ahead and grab a call, see what's going on this evening. Well, no, I'm not. The call is gone. All right. Nonetheless, if folks do want to get involved in the on-air, the number's up for anybody that cares to comment. I don't know if the weather's too nice and people don't want to call, or the subject is a little bit too out there that nobody's going to gravitate towards. I always run the risk of that, so, so be it. Again, just to keep in mind the idea that we have our free will, and we have an opportunity, very much so now, more so than any time really any time in history, actually, to take advantage of the opportunity to co-create with the divine, to ourselves move forward, and to play a part in our future, a very vital part, as much as we're able to. We fit ourselves for the work as much as we're able to take on of it, and once response turns into responsibility, then we can move forward and take advantage of this opportunity. Hello, caller.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, I heard y'all talking about an astrology meeting at Opal Divines. Are you going to have that?
Actually, that's Jeff Contreras that's hosting that, and I'm sure I'm going to make it down there to some of them, but that's a little bit more his baby. He and I are still hosting the philosophical meetings. That is every third Wednesday of every month, which will be the 15th of this month. But that's more of Jeff's thing, and if you wanted to email him at thereforeiam.com or...
You don't know when the meeting is?
No, I'm afraid I don't. I think it's going to be at Opal Divines, and I have spoken to him about it, but I haven't really aligned myself to where I'm going to be, it's like the 50-50 kind of thing that we kind of have going with the philosophical meetings. That's a bit more, again, a half and half type situation where we're taking equal responsibility. I am familiar with the fact that he's having the meetings, but I would, recommend that you somehow find a way to check in with Jeff and see if he can elaborate, because I don't know that he's.
I
know
think he
he's.
might have said the third Wednesday.
I'm sorry.
I think he might have said the third Wednesday.
Well, that's supposed to be the philosophical, so I'll check.
Oh,
He's hanging out here. He's hanging out here right now.
Okay.
He's producing Chris Athanas' show that's coming up in a minute here,
Yeah.
and so I definitely need to chat with him about other matters anyway. So I will put that bug in his ear and see, when is he having these philosophical meetings. And if you have an opportunity, obviously, to tune in at Monday nights at 10 on Channel 10, maybe he'd be willing to chat about it a bit and elaborate on, flesh it out a little bit more for us, because I am interested in that as well, and I don't really know too much of what he's got up his sleeve, so I apologize that I'm not more knowledgeable, but if you could check with Jeff, I'm sure he could fill you in.
Okay, well, thanks.
Thank you. Oh, it is right? That's philosophical? I mean, that's, okay, my producer just came in and told me that is current, that will be an astrological meeting on that day, so apparently that is the case. Hello, caller?
Yes, I really appreciate the subject that you are addressing. This is the first time I've ever bumped into your program. I'm a very avid student of our master. His real name that his family called him, and he called himself, was Yeshua Mashiach. He only spoke Aramaic. He never spoke any Hebrew, Greek, etc. And as you may recall, he was from the family of the Essenes,
yes.
The only ones in the tribes that were vegetarians, and the only ones that believed in reincarnation.
I've spoken about that on the show before.
What I'm particularly wanting to address right now is something probably most important to anyone who believes in his return,
yes.
Not to mention his first walk on the planet.
Yes.
And it's a simple question that I'd like you to address, and we can embroider on that if you want. I will stay on the line if you'd like me.
Go ahead.
How can we now, in the age of a repetition of pyramid builders who simply have developed much fancier technologic toys to enslave, exploit, and enslave the masses through exploitation and the greed that drives them, how can we do what the Master taught? How can we be in this world and not of it, and sustain our temporary physical vehicle so that we can be used well as instruments by God's will?
That's a very key question. That's a very crucial question.
Yes, sir.
And that's several shows in and of itself.
Well, let's address it at least on a elemental level for the audience.
I certainly will. And I think really it boils down to, as we are able, and each person is going to have the capacity to varying degrees of understanding, to want to work with the divine. That's the key. They're going to have to want to. And all of these situations that are coming up right now, be it September 11th or all the varying things that are going on, that are causing man to cry out as never before for some sort of intercession, some sort of help, and a return of Christ. And I would say that he truly has never left us, as he promised, and he is not going to necessarily reappear so much as return. And again, as far as specifics for people to be instruments, I think you're going to find instruments working for the reappearance or the return of Christ in so many odd places that you would never expect. And that, again, I think is our hope and our glory too, that it's a wide variety. There's a wide variety of people working in all kinds of various fields of human endeavor that are trying to embrace at least a synthetic inclusive philosophy, a global scope that's going to respect our free will, respect our inherent divinity, and respect our ability to co-create with the divine. Finding that balance is, again, key. And we have to also trust our intuition as much as possible, that we will be led to where we need to be at any given time if we so deem ourselves, and so, if we respond to that call and we try to fit ourselves for that work, that we have to trust our intuition as much as possible, and that will carry us to where we need to be. And I found that very evident in my own life. I feel like I'm a living example of just finding myself in certain situations and circumstances, largely outside of my, I don't know how these things happen, but I find myself in certain circles that I'm able to provide work, you know what I mean? And I feel like, teaching these ideas to a certain degree is part of one of my strong points, and we have to find our strong points as well. So if you could go ahead and elaborate a bit if you'd like to.
Well, I have an experience in life at the age of 52 of being completely sealed off from the opportunity of work by the secular world because I'm extremely upfront. I'm like the child born again that is willing to be so honest that, of course, anybody that honest in the secular world, anybody that open, is going to be identified as an enemy of the state, if you will, for lack of a better expression, and then sealed off. So that, you know, if an individual is not able to secure employment, they might as well be dead.
Okay, let me answer to that quickly. We can find creative ways to manipulate and maneuver through, and sometimes, as much as I hate to say this, you have to hold your tongue and you have to understand with whom you can espouse certain ideas and understand and respect that certain people choose a limited paradigm of understanding, a limited paradigm of expression, and that is their birthright. And that is good and fit and proper for them, and we have to respect that and not try to blow everybody's paradigm wide open. Certainly,
you might have missed me. I'm not a dogmatist. I'm not autocratic, and I don't
get that.
I don't put my stuff on others. What I was saying is that I'm like
just speaking
Christ.
your mind.
Christ taught beautifully, even when he went to the cross, not to be a doormat for anyone. In other words, when he said love your enemies, he didn't mean lay down and let them walk over you.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely
and
not.
Since we live in an ocean of population, planetary level now, of virtually the majority are false selves, totally identified with their flesh, and their ego's running the show. And the ego always says to itself, my will be done, not thy will be done.
Very good point, very good point.
And since most of them are cut off from receiving what I would refer to as, say, the message from the still small voice,
grace,
the counsel, the Holy Spirit,
or the Holy Spirit,
kind of a messaging to as guidance to help us in this infinitely. It seems like an infinite world of temptations and obligations that attaches to, let's say, for lack of a better expression, Beelzebub's agenda temporarily until he is removed from the false throne of the earth. It's been the greatest challenge of my life to attempt to always, I'm journeying, looking to how I can maintain being in the world and not of it, not extinguish myself prematurely. You'll notice that in Hebrews, I just, to quote the, I believe it's the 7th chapter, it's the 8th chapter, the verse 5 to 7, it talks specifically about and speaks of God sent his Son to literally learn the lesson of what it meant to suffer while maintaining perfect obedience. Now, that's not to imply that since we're imperfect creatures, that we have to do what he did. What it gets across, though, is that the Creator creates his creatures and gives them commissions, either conscious or subconscious, to literally learn by experience in the body through the, like C.S. Lewis talked about it, the school of pain.
That's very good.
Therefore, the pain is God's megaphone for awakening the deaf.
Yes.
I've had a slush fund of that in my life, starting from earliest memory as a child in the first year of my life. So I have some unique experience in that I have memory back, kinesthetic especially, but very precision memory back to the first year of my life of being born into this spiritual warfare on this planet. And the spiritual warfare now is way post-harmonic convergence, and you combine that with all the megatrends manifesting from overpopulation and insane out-of-control industrialization, insane out-of-control urban sprawl, destroying the biosphere, and going way beyond that. I'm only touching the tips of icebergs of what is almost seemingly an infinite list of the ways that we've painted ourselves in a corner as an life form on the planet, almost like it's a Petri dish with a glass cover on top. And we're the toxic in it that's growing and blowing it open.
Right. Well, I'm going to have to let you go, caller, because I have other guys online. But I do appreciate what you've had to say, and I would say just one thing, which is that there are triggers, so-called, that allow us to have a remembering of our place, and like you described yourself, having cognizance of a spiritual battle. There are so many people that are aligning themselves up to that magnetic pull right now in our day and age that we have opportunity to take advantage of that if we so choose. And our remembering of that, certain things trigger certain people. Pain is one thing. And also, you mentioned suffering in this world. The great Buddha, the great brother of Christ, the Buddha, taught wisdom and that life is suffering, and he complemented the message of Christ in many ways as well and said those very same things also. So we have many people that have an understanding of that, and that to get past the suffering, that's the key. To learn not to suffer, to live in the world, but not, to be in the world but not of the world, and that is the key. Hello, caller.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Oh, yes. I, like the other gentleman, this is my first time that I've bumped into you, and I'm really excited.
Oh, thank you.
And my question is, can you touch on the Bhagavad Gita at all? Because I'm kind of confused as to, I mean, I believe that maybe there's one God and he has many different manifestations.
Yes.
And I hear you talking about Christ, and
Yes.
I just heard you talking about Buddha. Is that a possibility that...
Okay, I'll answer that as I let you go. I have other calls, so and I'm running out of time. That's the main thing, so I have to make this brief. But I will say this. Okay, the example of the Bhagavad Gita, and that's funny. I had an idea that I would be talking about this today on the air for some reason. I don't know why. That's very ironic that you call and ask that. Arjuna, the world disciple, is on the battlefield, Kurukshetra, I believe it's called. That is basically our emotional nature. That is the battle of the turmoil of our emotional nature for us to overcome that and to be mentally predisposed so that we can be more appropriate channels of the soul, our own souls, or again, the will aspect of, ultimately higher than that, the will aspect of God as well. That those two forces are coming into our vehicle, and we're making use of them by virtue of that. And that whole story of the Bhagavad Gita and that in Arjuna touches upon that. And if Christianity ultimately knew how much they had, not with just the other world religions, as I spoke of Buddhism, but of Hinduism, that there are many, many ties behind the scenes, esoterically, that tie these religions together at a most intimate and profound level, if humanity could only but grasp that. And I'm going to let that lie for now. I'll try to grab one more call quickly if I can. Hello, caller. Go ahead.
Corey.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question.
Okay, you have to make it ultra brief. I apologize.
Okay. Now, you know about the Revelation talks about the reign of the Antichrist.
Yes.
7-year tribulation.
True.
Are we in the middle of that right now?
I would say, I'm going to answer off the air. I would say no, in the sense that if you understand the aspect of the Kabbalah, that religious book, that holy book, has symbolism in it, and that the writers of, in particular, Revelations, John the Revelator, had influence through the Kabbalah, and that he used symbols to designate time, for instance. And the 666 is a time factor as opposed to anything that's really in our age. It's far in the future, or quite a ways down in the future for us for that actual manifestation to take place. And the 666 is basically the idea of selfishness, that we are separate from any other living thing. That is basically black magic or 666. Thank you for your call. I'd like to encourage everyone to stay tuned for Chris Athanas and the Reality Expander TV show coming up next. I'd like to thank my producer, Chris, for commanding the helm of the Starship Esoterica. I'd like to remind folks that we are here live every Tuesday on Channel 10 from 8 to 9. If you have any interest in this topic or things metaphysical, please join us, and you're welcome to call in and espouse your view on the subjects. Thanks again, Austin. Have a nice evening.